Hello everybody, this is Hammer Striker here. Today I've got one of the newest offerings from Glock, just recently introduced and hit the streets on the 21st of January 19. It's the GLOCK 43X. It's Glock's answer to the P365, which of course holds 10 in a small single-ish stack. Some call it a stack and a half, some still call it a single stack. But basically it's a slight offset, but it's not a full double stack. This gun is actually quite easy to shoot. It's actually easier to shoot well than the 43 itself, mostly due to the grip ergonomics and the sizes. But let's pick this thing up and talk about it a little bit. Of course, it is unloaded. It comes with these single stack looking 10 round magazines, but it actually kind of offsets just a hair, so that you can add the additional 4 rounds over the 43, because the 43 holds 6, without necessarily being significantly longer than the 43. It ends up only being about 3/4 of an inch taller than the 43. So dimensionally, if you go front to back, it's 6.5 inches, and the 43 is 6.26, so it's about 1/4 inch longer. And if you look at the height, it's 504, and the 43 is 4.25, so it's about a 3/4 inch taller. And from a thickness perspective, it's a little bit fatter than the 43 at 1.10 inches overall thickness, whereas the 43 is 1.06. So 0.046 in thickness and 3/4 an inch in height gives you well over 50% more round capacity. So unless you're in a really constrained carry environment where that extra little bit of length is going to make a big difference, you can pick up quite a bit of capacity in that extra little bit of footprint. And of course that's the big allure for the P365 as well. And that's why Glock and several other manufacturers are picking up on that and trying to roar into that market. From a weight perspective, it's 18.7 ounces, which is about 3/4 ounces more than the Glock 43. So there's a lot more capacity and not a whole lot more physical footprint. This particular one has the standard Glock U-dot sights, and I've always kind of been able to see these quite well and use them quite well. They are readily available in the Glock 3-dot sights. So let me bring a little spoiler. I've got a Glock 48, and there'll be an upcoming video on that. This has the Glock night sights, which is actually, these are Glock sights which have always been around, but they've been relatively hard to get, a gun coming from the factory with them. And then they're also available with the AmeriGlow sights. These sights are actually quite easy to see, and they work quite well. This particular one is a blue label gun, and at the moment the blue labels are only available with the standard U-dot sights. In the blue label program, if you're curious about that, it allows you to buy at a discount, and whether you're a law enforcement officer, an agent of the court, or check out Glock Sport Shooting Foundation, we've got a video on them, and it's a significant discount. It allows you to buy these, any Glock significantly under retail. This does lack the replaceable back straps that its bigger brothers do, just like the 43, at the regular 43, there's no replaceable back straps. But I did find it comfortable to hold. It's actually pretty much a 3-finger grip unless you've got large hands. You put the magazine in, the magazine base plate stays well out of the way, and the gap is large enough that it's not going to pinch your fingers. It's not going to get in and squeeze you. Even if you get a larger hand. Hammer's got bigger hands than me, and he was having no problem shooting it, wasn't getting pinched, or having any difficulty ejecting and installing the magazine. It has the same reversible magazine catch that the Gen 4 and newer have had. It does include front serrations as well as the back serrations. Glock is finally kind of picking up on the things that the customers have been complaining about and watching what people do with their guns when they first get them home. Then they send them off to have the slides milled, or they swap out the sights with night sights. So they're kind of answering those various things right from the factory. Now unfortunately they still chose not to put a rail on it. And I imagine it'll be very quick that the aftermarket will pick up, just like Crimson Trace, and actually some of those may even fit. I haven't checked yet to see if the Crimson Trace that fits the 43 itself will fit this, because the grip is thicker, but that doesn't necessarily mean any of this is larger. So it'll be interesting to see, but I imagine the aftermarket will pick up quick, and there'll be all sorts of lights and lasers that you can hang on this, just like you can the other ones. It does not have any ambidextrous features, just like the standard Glocks. And it is fully drop safe. It has all the same internal drop safety mechanisms, the split trigger and everything else that any other Glock has. So from a trigger perspective, it's got a typical trigger very similar to the 43, and it's got a kind of a hard break. It's a real crisp, hard wall. And then your standard Glock relatively short reset, you're right on the wall. Of course, you can feel it, you can hear it, and then that break. I do plan to put a minus connector in this one, kind of lighten that trigger up by about a pound. It comes in around 5.5. It does come in better than the original 42s and 43s when they first hit the streets came in. This comes in more along the lines of the standard full-size Glocks as far as what you're used to in a trigger. And overall, we found this really easy to get a hold of. It just, that little extra thickness that might make it a little more difficult to carry, but not much, kind of makes it fit in your hand better. One of the problems with the 43, at least for me, is that thin, very ovalish grip. It's kind of hard to just get it right in your hand where it belongs. And of course, you've only got a 2-finger grip on it. Whereas with this one, it just drops right into the hand and it fits comfortably. So target acquisition, getting that grip right, getting the gun to not move as you pull the trigger, that little extra bit of size seems to make a big difference in making this more easily shot well than its little 43 brother. Now that I've got this thing out, let's set them up side by side and show you the difference and drop a mag in it. So when you set them side by side, of course you can see the grip thickness just a little bit. It doesn't really stand out unless you're looking. The slides themselves are about the same size, but you can see just a bit more thickness. And then of course if you put them this way, you can see the height. You can see the extra 3/4 inch, and you almost can't see that extra 1/4 inch. It really just kind of disappears. So really, in all reality, what you're looking at here from a size perspective, the big difference is this little 3/4 inch grip height. And of course the grip is the hardest part to hide, but that little extra difference isn't going to make a significant difference. I'm kind of expecting the 43X may impact the 43 sales. Because if you're needing that ultra super small, you're probably going to go towards the 42, which is smaller than either one of these. Otherwise, you're probably going to lean towards the capacity, because the next step up to get 10 round capacity would be going to a 26, which is a full double stack. And nice gun to carry, but it is a fat little thing, and it does actually make it a little bit more difficult to conceal depending on what you're trying to do. The other thing that I kind of not mentioned, but kind of stands right out, and it's right out here in your face, is the color. Glock has recently gotten past, it always just being black, and they've got this new DLC finish in silver. When I first get it, and it's kind of dirty and it's kind of dry looking, it's not even looking, but as soon as you clean it and put a little thin film oil on it, it smooths out and it actually looks quite nice. And I do believe it'll be very, very durable. The DLC finish is a really strong, durable finish, and when I get it apart, you'll be able to see internally they did a good job with it. There's not a whole lot of discrepancies or weak spots or thin spots, which sometimes happens with the PVD coating. This coating is actually pretty well evenly done. So you might be wondering, okay, I've decided I want one of these, how much is this going to hurt? Well, street price on these isn't bad. This one, as you see it, if it were not a blue label, if it were a retail gun, would be about $450. Goes up about $30-40 for the Glock night sight variant, and the $550-ish territory for the Mariglow. Personally, if I were wanting the night sights, I would go with the Glock night sights. For that little extra price, they're actually a really good sight. And the only difference I can see on the Mariglows, besides the name, is the Mariglows have it's either an orange or a red rim around it instead of white. But beyond that, they seem to be functionally the same sight. So let's go ahead and get this thing taken apart, show you the internals. First, get rid of the magazine. Of course, it's unloaded. Pull the trigger, a little squeeze, and we pop it apart. Now, one thing this one does that the 43 also does is the recoil spring assembly tends to come loose as you're taking it apart. It doesn't happen in any of the other Glocks. It happens on the 43, and it happens on this one. It doesn't hurt anything other than the fact if you go to take it apart and then change your mind and go to put it back together, sometimes it'll hang up. So if you decide you're going to take it apart, and then reseat the recoil spring and put it back together. And it is a dual recoil spring, just like all the modern Glocks. These have the Glock marksman barrel, very well finished. It's typical, polished feed ramp, but it's not a mirror polish. It's just basically a machine polish, and then it's coated. But if I give you a look down inside of it, you'll see it's kind of a hybrid between conventional rifling and the polygonal rifling. and that's characteristic of the Glock Marksman barrel they're putting on the Gen 5s and basically all their newer guns. It does work, not necessarily going to say that it's particularly more or less accurate than the regular barrel, but it does work, and I haven't had any problems with any of these not stabilizing or anything like that. But typically, most handguns are functionally, mechanically, more accurate than the hand they're in. And the internals on the slide, now you will see some things like this is a little bit of brass, and there's a few places where there's a little left over of their copper lube. But overall, it's well finished in here, smooth. Of course, you're seeing some oil residue, and of course, anything that's not black really looks bad when it's dirty. And this one is clean, but the oil residue kind of makes it, reflect funny. There's a little bit of, inconsistency here, and mostly that's where the barrel hood rubs as you fire the gun. Everything else in here is really typical Glock. There's your drop safety plunger, which is now, rectangular-ish, kind of oval instead of round like the older guns. So again, consistent with the new Gen 5 series. And the frame, if the camera wants to focus it, is pretty typical of any of the Glocks, just a little bit smaller. It's got the new Gen 5 43 fire control group where the striker and the little cross there is a little bit different how it's set up, but beyond that it's functionally the same. And of course there's your plunger for the drop safety. Overall, from a Glock perspective, if you've opened up one Glock, you've opened up any Glock for the most part. A few parts are moved around a little bit and everything else. One little difference here is there's a single pin for the trigger pivot, and of course a pin at the back to hold the fire control group in. Some of the bigger Glocks and the Gen 4s have 2 pins, but I'm not aware of any issues with these, the 43s, or any of the others with frame cracking. They had gone to 2 pins at one point where they were having some difficulties, but they've kind of refined all the processes, and some of the newer guns are coming with the 2 pins, but they're working perfectly well. Let's go ahead and get this thing put back together, which is actually quite easy to do. Drop the barrel in, drop the recoil spring in, kind of make sure it centers. Give it a little push with the thumb, make sure it centers, because if it doesn't, it'll have a tendency to hang up when you slide it back together. Glocks are among the easiest out there to take apart and put back together. About the only thing that causes any difficulty with Glocks is if your hands can't get a hold of these little things, these little ridges. But there's an extended version of those available for somebody that's having difficulty. And for this and bigger guns, there's a little clip you can buy that grabs them, pulls them down. It doesn't work too well on the 42 and 43, but it'll work on this and above. But if you're looking for a compact concealed, looking for something like the P365, but for whatever reason you aren't interested in the P365, or you're used to Glocks and you want to stay with the consistent trigger and the consistent ergonomics, this is actually going to be a good choice. I expect this to be quite popular. The 48, which we'll do a follow-up video on, because we've actually got one of those as well, I don't necessarily expect to be quite as popular, because it's going to be one of those, where does it fit into the picture kind of thing. This is smaller, and if I'm going to go to a full-size 19, I might go to a double stack. So I'm not really sure where it fits in. So if you like our videos, please give it a thumbs up, share, subscribe, click that bell if you do subscribe so you get notified when we put out a new one. Check us out on Facebook and Patreon, and have a great day. Thank you.